Beach Betrayal. Hey, did you hear? Gunnar waved his phone as if he could manually fling the information at Dylan. Aiden's having a beach party this weekend. Dylan glanced at his watch, and he thought late Thursday evening was a good time to let people know. Bro's got a lot to learn about planning ahead. Gunnar shrugged. He was supposed to be meeting his family, I think. Something must have come up, but the place is already rented. So what? He's looking to get us to come down and cover the cost. The Frosh was probably going to be looking for 50 or $100 apiece, and the guest list was bound to be weak due to the last-minute nature of the invitation. There were sure to be better, cheaper parties around campus. Nope, said Gunnar. Totally covered. Whole house, beach access, the works, all the way through Sunday. Dylan perked back up. Now that's what I like to hear. Don't suppose he's got the beer? How's he gonna have that? You know he's not 21 yet. What, like it's hard to get a fake ID? Dylan shook his head. All right, fine. For a free beach house, we can bring some drinks. Who's he inviting? Text says, bring everyone. Dylan grinned. Smart guy. All right, let's get the word out. Tell them the caravan leaves tomorrow at 10 a.m. I've got a 9 a.m. class, Gunnar complained. Not tomorrow, you don't. You've got a 9 a.m. beer run. We're storming the beaches at 10, but sounds like you're about to say something might be more important than going to a free weekend party at the beach. I want you to think about that, Gunnar. Is that who you really want to be? Someone who skips a free beach party because he doesn't want to miss class? 9 a.m. beer run then. 9 for the beer, 10 in the car, beach by 11. The weekend starts early, my friend. Dylan's phone buzzed. It was the same message Gunnar had mentioned and included a picture from inside the house. The beach was visible through the large picture windows. The back porch opened out onto the sand. It was the perfect place for a party. This place looks primo, said Dylan. Oh, he finally got around to inviting you directly? Gunnar said jokingly. Guess we know where you rank on the list. The very top, if he knows what's good for him, said Dylan. Only way he's getting anywhere in this frat is on my say-so. This beach party's a good move to make a name for himself, but it's not any of you he has to impress. It's me. Uh-huh, said Gunnar clearly, only half listening. Didn't you just say you were impressed when you saw the picture of the house? We'll see once everyone shows up. The house is nothing without a good crowd. That's why he was smart to tell us to invite everyone. We'll bring the party. So you won't be impressed with him until you see if the right people show. But you'll be the one bringing the people? Hey, Gunnar, shut up. I can sign out a campus van, said Gunnar, ignoring him. If you think you can find enough people not to disappoint yourself at Aiden's party. You're about to disappoint my fists, bro. Gunnar laughed as he left the room. I'll get the van then. Don't let me down. Don't let yourself down. Despite the late notice, by the time 10 o'clock rolled around the next morning, all of the seats in the 15-passenger van were full. Gunnar piled backpacks into the narrow space behind the last seat, shoving the rear doors to force them shut and trap the luggage in place. Dylan leaned on the door, helping Gunnar close it. He looked satisfied with himself. Full van, and more, girls than guys, he said. Not bad for last minute, huh? Yeah, it takes a good salesman to talk people into a free beach trip, said Gunnar. Just admit it's a good crew, said Dylan. He nodded at Mariah, who was currently climbing into the first row, sliding over to sit behind the driver's seat. Look, Mariah's here. I know you've been thinking about her. She's even sitting closest to you. Everyone's just getting in wherever. You didn't plan that. Maybe, said Dylan, affecting an air of mystery. It was spoiled a moment later when he yelled, Hey, get in the back, Troy. I called. Shotgun. A few minutes and a few brief arguments later, everyone was seated and the doors were closed. Where's all of the beer? Todd complained. Under the seat, said Gunnar, starting up the van. We got everyone? There was a chorus of agreement. Then let's roll. Hey, said Todd, feeling around under the seat. There's a big metal bar here. How'd you get the beer in? I put it in from the back, said Gunnar. Well, how am I supposed to get it out? It's enrichment, bro. It'll give you something to do on the drive. The rest of the van laughed. Todd ignored them as he continued to wiggle his hand back under the bench seat. A few minutes later, he let out a triumphant grunt as he pulled forth a slightly dented can of beer and opened it. "Todd, can you grab me one?" asked Madison. "What's in it for me?" "Enrichment," she said with a sly smile. Todd passed his beer over immediately and began fishing for another. "You just do anything a girl tells you, Todd?" called Dylan from the front seat. "Yep," said Todd, cracking a new beer. "It's worked out so far." "Then would one of you ladies please tell Todd to get beers for everyone?" By the time they arrived at the beach house, the first case of beer was empty, and Todd was attempting to find his way into another. "All right, time for sweet beach freedom," said Gunnar, swinging out of the car. "Whew, something nasty must have come in on the tide. It stinks out here. The ocean always smells funny," said Todd. He clambered out, took a breath, and shook his head. "All right, but not like that, though. Something must be dead on the beach." "Hey, everyone." Aiden was waving at them from the front door. He scanned the group as they disembarked and gave an overly broad smile. "Full van, huh? Great, that's great. Come on in. I'm glad to see you all here." He sounded oddly nervous, but his smile never wavered as he ushered them all inside. "Just dump your stuff anywhere. We'll sort out rooms in a bit. How was the ride? Everything good?" "Relax, bro," said Dylan, clapping him on the shoulder. "You need a beer?" "No, yeah, actually, I do." Todd, who had just deposited an armload of cases on the table, pulled a beer out and handed it to Aiden. "Here, take a sniff of this and get that fishy stink out of your nose." "Oh man, is that reek still around?" Aiden's laugh had a shrill tinge to it. "I stopped smelling it a while ago. Must be something down at the beach." "That's what I said," said Todd. "Let's go see if we can find it later. Maybe it's one of those deep-sea squid or something." "So your family ditched you this weekend, huh?" said Dylan. "There was a family emergency," said Aiden. "My grandmother. I was already down here, but they all ended up going to stay with her in the hospital." "You ditched your sick grandma to party?" "Aiden, wow, I didn't think you had it in you." "It's not like that," said Aiden, looking offended. "I'm just messing with you, bro. Anyway, this house is awesome. Sorry about your grandma, but this is going to be a killer weekend." "Yeah," said Aiden. He took a hasty swig of his beer. "Glad you could make it." "We gonna go find this squid or what?" asked Todd. "I'm getting changed and going swimming," said Mariah. "Swimming it is," said Todd. He saw Dylan smirking at him and added, "What?" "Finding the dead squid can wait. It's not going anywhere. That's how being dead works. Right now it's time to be alive." The afternoon flew by in a blur of sand and surf. The weather was beautiful. The waves were rambunctious, but not dangerous. The smell was the only thing marring an otherwise perfect day. And just as Aiden had said, they all stopped noticing it after a little while. "Hey, what's in that shed?" Dylan asked at one point. He indicated a weathered outbuilding sitting a short distance from the house, perched on a small rocky outcrop at the edge of the sand. "Any good beach stuff? Looks like the sort of place they might keep kayaks or something." "I don't even know if that's part of the property," Aiden said. "So? Besides, it's locked." Dylan grinned. "See, I knew you wouldn't let a little thing like property rights stop you from having fun at the beach. Want to go see if we can pick the lock?" Aiden shook his beer can to show that it was empty. "I'm gonna go grab another drink, actually." "Yeah, all right," said Dylan. "I'll come with." Back at the house, they found Gunnar and Mariah in the kitchen. Gunnar was dabbing at Mariah's back with a paper towel. "You're just giving her a sponge bath in the middle of the kitchen?" Dylan asked. "You two don't want any privacy for that?" "Funny," said Gunnar. "She cut herself on something while swimming. I'm just trying to get it cleaned up." "I'm telling you, I didn't cut myself," said Mariah. "I was just standing there. Something scraped me as it passed by. I think it was a shark." Dylan examined the thin red line across her back skeptically. It stretched diagonally from her waist to just below her ribs on the left side. It looked like a scratch from a rock or shell. "So you think a shark swam by and what? Forgot to bite down? Just got you with one tooth?" "Shark skin is rough, stupid," said Mariah. "I just think it scraped me. That thin line. It could have been a fin." "Look, it doesn't matter," said Gunnar. "It's a cut, and the ocean's full of all kinds of gross stuff. We have any sort of antibacterial anything? There's a bottle of vodka, said Dylan. Gunnar looked at Mariah, who shrugged. Yeah, close enough. Aiden, would you go get the doctor his antiseptic? Dylan asked. Doctor, make sure the patient gets her shots. In fact, we should all take one. We've all been in the ocean. He took the bottle from Aiden and poured a generous amount into 4 cups. To shark attacks. Give me that, said Gunnar, reaching for the bottle. Dylan slid it out of his reach. Come on, I'm actually trying to do something useful here. So am I, said Dylan. I'm trying to get my friends drunk so we can have a good time. Do the shots, and then you can go back to playing. Doctor with Mariah. All 4 clinked their plastic cups and drank. Dylan smacked his lips and clapped Aiden on the shoulder. Come on, let's leave Dr. Gunnar to examine the patient in peace. Outside, he added, I'm proud of my boy. You see his move there? She gets a little cut, and he's right there being sympathetic and taking care of her. Girls love that sort of stuff. They're gonna be hooking up tonight. Maybe, said Aiden. He was staring out at the ocean. His eyes were troubled. What? Did you have your eye on her? Don't sweat it, bro. Plenty of chicks here to try it on with. How about Bree? You probably got a shot with Bree. Todd's been chasing Bree all day. Todd chases every girl he sees. All that means is that they're running from him. You want it, take your shot. It's your beach party. Come on, don't let your grandma have gotten sick for nothing. Yeah, said Aiden. He was still staring out to sea. No, yeah. It's gotta go this way. You even listening to me, bro? Aiden turned and gave Dylan a big smile. Definitely. Hey, I'm gonna go snag that bottle of vodka. It's about time to start getting everyone warmed up for the party, yeah? There you go. Shots all around. Now we're talking. By the time the sun set, the party was in full swing. Empty beer cans littered the back porch. 6 people were crammed into the 4-person hot tub. Todd had set up a speaker and appointed himself DJ, which meant that every time he wandered too far away, the music would begin to skip and stutter. After being yelled at by the entire party for the 5th time, he just left his phone by the speaker with a shouted warning not to touch it. He hurried back out to the beach, following the sounds of shouting and laughter in the dark from the partiers still in the ocean. Hey, are y'all skinny dipping? Wait up. Gunnar and Dylan, teamed with Mariah and Bree respectively, were facing, off in a game of beer pong. Dylan held the ball up to his eye level, carefully sighted along it, and took his shot. He missed by half a foot. Dude, said Gunnar, retrieving the errant ball. Bree has been carrying you all night. I'm just trying to make you look good in front of your girl, said Dylan. Anyway, give me a break. This is like my 5th game. Couple of beers knocking you out? Taunted Gunnar. He sank his shot flawlessly. Well, have another. If you were better at this, you wouldn't have to drink so much. Oh no, drinking. What a terrible punishment, said Dylan, downing the beer. Where's Todd? Madison called from the hot tub. His playlist is repeating. We've already heard this song and like the 2 before it, too. Down in the ocean, I think, said Dylan. He walked over to Todd's phone, stumbling slightly. Hang on, I'll fix it. As he looked at the phone, a smile spread across his face. Maybe not in the ocean, look at this. Todd's got a text that says, come to the beach shed. Todd, you sly dog. Who's it from? Unknown number. Who? Wouldn't he have in his phone? Who else isn't here? Everyone looked around. Ashley's not, said Bree. Madison laughed, covering her mouth. There's a whole house right here they could have used to hook up in with beds and everything. Going to that shed is something else. She must be doing it for attention. Well then, let's give them some, said Dylan. You want to go bang on the walls? Hey, let's just... Aiden began. He was cut off by a sudden piercing scream from the beach. It sliced through the conversation, music and laughter, freezing the entire party in an instant. The scream ended as abruptly as it began, and it did not repeat. Stop the music, said Gunnar. Hey, you guys okay out there? Dylan, would you turn that off? Hang on. I accidentally turned off the screen, said Dylan, poking at the device. I think it's... Suddenly he fell backwards, shouting and throwing Todd's phone at the creature that loomed up out of the darkness. Details were sparse in the dim light, but it stood as tall as a person and hissed through a mouthful. of bladed teeth. Water flew from its scaly skin as it stomped at Dylan's prone form. He shouted and scrambled backward, narrowly avoiding being disemboweled by the prominent talons on its webbed foot. Everett scrambled from the hot tub to help, only to be seized from behind by another of the fish-like creatures and shoved back, into the tub. The bubbling water turned red as its edged scales cut into his unprotected neck and face. Madison and the others in the tub screamed and flung themselves out, tumbling down to the wooden porch in terrified haste. More of the creatures appeared, sliding out of the darkness like eels. They formed a threatening net around the porch, corralling the trapped partygoers. "Get into the house," shouted Gunnar, grabbing Mariah as he ran. "We don't have a chance out here." "Screw that," said Dylan, grabbing for the foot of the first one as it tried to stomp on him again. "They can, Ulk." His sentence faltered in a cry of pain as he seized the fishman's foot in both hands, only to have the flesh shredded from his palms by the jagged scales. Even that cry died away as the creature ripped its foot free and swung forward with a lethal kick, driving its sharp nails up through the soft flesh of Dylan's jaw and spearing into his head. The lower half of his face exploded in a red ruin. Dylan flopped briefly as the creature tore its foot free and then was still. The scene was carnage. The hot tub frothed a garish pink, casting strange shifting shadows across the deck as Everett's body was pushed about by the jets. Dylan's corpse lay in a spreading puddle of beer and blood. The music still thumped on, mostly hiding the muffled sounds of panic coming from inside the house as the frantic students tried to hide. Only Aiden remained outside. The monsters closed in, hissing. He swallowed as their stench engulfed him, but he did not flinch. "Okay," he said. "They're all inside. I got their phones. I got the keys. All you have to do is go take them." The closest creature hissed, holding out its webbed hands. It tapped one finger across the others, counting something. "I don't understand," said Aiden. Panic started to creep into his voice. "I did what you wanted. You said you'd let my family go if I brought you. More." The fishman held up 2 fingers, then 1. "Yeah, 2 for 1. I brought you 15. That's way more than you asked for." It gestured to Everett, drowned in the hot tub. It nodded at Dylan, his body a broken ruin. It ticked 2 of its fingers. "How is it my fault if you killed them?" demanded Aiden. The creature hissed, chattering its teeth. Aiden shrank back. Fine. Still, that's only 2. There are It waved languidly toward the beach, then tapped its fingers again. Tick, 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 tick. 5 more times. Aiden swallowed again. "All of them? Okay. But still, that still leaves 8 inside. My mother, my father, and my sisters. That's 4. 8 for 4. 2 for 1, like you said." The creature tapped its fingers once more. Tick, 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 tick. 5, but it reached out and tapped one deadly claw against Aiden's chest, drawing the merest pinprick of blood. But it took a step closer. Aiden's voice rose in pitch. Okay. Just let me. I can get more people out. Here tomorrow, just don't." In a sharp darting moment, the fishman buried its face in Aiden's neck. Blood fountained as it bit down, chewing and swallowing. The others rushed in, tearing chunks from Aiden's flailing form, ripping flesh from bone, and eating him raw. By the time the frenzy subsided, nothing recognizable remained of Aiden. The fish creatures rose to their feet and in unison began to stalk toward the house. They would catch and kill the ones inside. They would add their bodies to the stockpile in the beach shed, and perhaps if they were lucky, they would find another, one gullible enough to believe that there were any left alive, to barter for or rescue. Fishing was always easiest in a stocked pond. Numbers to nowhere. "What do you have there, Cassie?" I asked my daughter as she played with something in the living room. "Oh, it's just a marker I got from my friend." She smiled at me as she responded, and I didn't think anything of it. My daughter is a very sociable 7-year-old with a lot of neighborhood friends. I was about to walk away to continue cooking dinner when I saw a strange marking on Cassie's birthday gift. "Cassie, Please don't draw on your present. That mirror was an antique your mother and I bought for you. I'm sorry, Daddy. My friend told me to write it. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's pretty. She smiled again, disarming my frustration, but I was still confused by what I was looking at. Did one of her friends speak a different language? I looked again at the odd mark on the fancy hand mirror. My wife and I had bought the mirror for Cassie's 7th birthday at an estate sale. It was a very old antique beauty mirror with real silver and sapphires studded in it. We were surprised. It was so cheap considering the valuable materials, but we weren't complaining. The marking she left on the hand mirror's edge, written just at the corner where the glass met the metal, was some odd little rune or sigil. The mark looked like 5 Ys stacked together. It didn't resemble any language I recognized, and I didn't know how she would have known to draw something like that on her own. Puzzled, I decided to ask her, "Hey, honey, what friend told you to draw this marking?" She paused briefly, and her smile shifted into one of unease that concerned me. "Well," she started, "you probably won't believe me, but it was the Mirror Man. He told me it's a number from his world." It made more sense now. It was just some imaginary friend and the marking was made up. Cassie was very talented at drawing for only being 7, so I didn't put it past her to come up with an intricate design like that. "Oh, did he now?" I asked, offering my own disarming smile and a brief chuckle. She did not smile back. Instead, she looked a little sad. "I knew you wouldn't believe me. He said you wouldn't." I seemed to have upset her, so I decided to play along, at least in a way that didn't seem condescending or like I was poking fun at her friend. "Okay, honey, I'm sorry. Did the Mirror Man say what the number was for?" She smiled again and said, "Yes. He said it had to do with his visit, and that the numbers and the mirror would let him visit soon." "Okay. Well, tell the Mirror Man that we can play, but no drawing on the mirror we got you for your birthday. It's very old and very valuable." She loved the mirror and used it all the time, despite my initial protests to keep it safe in her room since she could lose it or it could be stolen. She talked to it and played with it, first pretending to reenact Mirror, Mirror on the wall. But recently it seemed her new mirror game was talking to the Mirror Man and writing whatever came to her mind. I loved her stories and her creativity, but the look she gave me when I doubted her seemed genuine, and it troubled me. The next day I got home from work early and decided to surprise Cassie with pizza. I had just come in the door and was bringing it into the kitchen when I heard her talking in the living room again. "Okay, Gallus, but I don't want to get in trouble. Dad will be mad if I leave those marks on the mirror and on the other ones." There was an odd pause, and for a fleeting moment I wondered if she was actually talking with someone. Who was Gallus? Was that what she had named the Mirror Man? There was no response that I could hear, and Cassie soon came into the kitchen, greeting me warmly and acting as though nothing unusual had happened. I thought it was odd, but chalked it up to her imagination again. Later that night, I was awakened by a noise from downstairs. I almost went back to sleep, but when I heard it again, I resolved to check it out. For a brief moment, I was concerned. It might be an intruder, but then I focused on the sound and heard the light patter of Cassie's footsteps and relaxed. No intruder, but she shouldn't have been up. I was being run ragged with my wife away for the week at a conference, and I had wanted to talk to her more about Cassie's behavior, but she was too busy to discuss it at any length. When I got downstairs, I found Cassie in the living room with her marker. She was drawing on the mirror on the wall. I was a little frustrated that she had ignored my earlier request, and I went into the room to talk to her. She gasped, clearly startled that I was there, almost as if I had broken her out of a trance. "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry. I really had to. Though, I want to see my friend, and he says I have to draw these on all the mirrors or I won't be able to see him." Once again, I was surprised to see the honest concern in her eyes, and I couldn't tell if it was just because she had been caught or if she truly thought what she was doing was important. "I don't want to stifle your creativity, honey, but you really can't be drawing on all the mirrors like that. And you really can't be disobeying me or Mommy when we say not to do something. I don't know if that marker is permanent or if we'll even be able to clean those off." I tried to tell her as amicably as possible, but I could tell she was upset by my tone, feeling guilty and sad. I took her back upstairs and tucked her into bed. On my way back to my room, I stopped to use the bathroom, and when I turned on the light, I let out a frustrated groan. She had left a marking on the mirror up here as well, this time a large Y with 3 smaller ones above it. I remembered the marking from the day before and thought the character looked similar. Whatever it wasn't random. It had some design or purpose. It even looked like it could be a number since the previous character had 5 Ys and this one had 4. I thought perhaps my daughter, despite being so young, might have somehow learned bits of another language. But how? We didn't exactly have the resources on hand here to teach her that. The next day, while I was at work, I got a call from Cassie's school. I found out she had gotten into a fight. I was surprised and concerned. That definitely wasn't like her. I had to pick her up, and the principal told me that a classmate had tried to take her mirror to look at it, and Cassie had gotten very upset and punched them in the face to get it back. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That wasn't like Cassie at all. I tried talking to her in the car on the way home, but she was sullen and brooding about the event. After reminding her that we don't respond to people taking our things with violence, she interrupted with a frustrated outburst. "Gallus is my friend. I didn't want to lose him." That name again. Gallus. I figured it must be her made-up name for the Mirror Man. This was getting old now. It was affecting her school life, and with violent outbursts. Like that, she could get expelled. I tried talking to her again, but she shut down and barely acknowledged I was speaking. I didn't know what to do. I wished her mother had been home because whatever I was doing clearly wasn't working. After an uncomfortable, silent dinner, I was putting Cassie to bed and started getting ready to sleep myself when I heard something that sounded like creaking on the stairs. Not again. I went downstairs, and sure enough, Cassie was there, holding her mirror in one hand and the marker in the other, writing on the living room mirror again. I was over it at that point. I stormed into the room, startling her. "Not again, no more of this. You're cleaning these up tomorrow, but first you're going to bed, and you're giving me the mirror." She looked like she was about to cry, and spoke. "No, I can't, not yet. Gallus will be angry." I was getting so tired of this game that I shouted again and took the mirror from her, sending her upstairs. She let go of it without fighting, pausing briefly to look at me and then at the mirror. She ran upstairs, a faint sob making me feel terrible about what I had done. Despite my initial feeling of vindication in catching her breaking the rules, again. I looked down at the mirror. Sure enough, there was another marking. This time it looked like 3 very slender Ys. The numbers seemed to be counting down from whatever they had started at. I was puzzled by whatever language they were in, and how Cassie would know how to write in it. While considering these things, my eyes were drawn to the center of the mirror, and I felt an odd sense of vertigo and unease. I started to entertain suspicions that there was more to this mirror than we knew, and I wished I had learned more about the people whose estate sale we had bought it from. Next, I decided to look up Gallus. I didn't find anything initially, but when I searched the term in relation to Sumerian mythology, what I found was deeply disturbing. The name Gallus, or Galu, referred to great demons or devils from ancient Mesopotamian religion that stole victims away to the underworld to be tormented, regardless of guilt or innocence. I started thinking about the Sumerian numerals counting down and how Cassie had said the Mirror Man, or Gallus, would arrive when the countdown finished. There was no way this could be real. It had to be a joke. Cassie couldn't have made up ancient Sumerian numbers and the literal name of a caste of demonic kidnappers. I was getting legitimately freaked out at that point. I was so distracted by my research that I lost track of time and realized I had likely missed Cassie's next trance-like sleepwalking episode. I rushed to check the bathroom mirror to confirm, and there it was. 2 large, slender Ys marking the number 2. Every other mirror in the house bore the same symbol. I didn't know what to do. I started looking for Cassie to put her back to bed. Yet to my absolute shock and horror, Cassie was gone. I tore the house apart searching for her, pleading for her to come out from wherever she was hiding, but it was no use. I called the police and gave them her description, explaining the situation in case she had run away, leaving out the more paranoid and supernatural concerns. I hoped that if she had run off, they could help find her quickly. I almost fell asleep on the couch downstairs, exhausted from calling every number I could think of and searching the neighborhood for hours. I spent the entire day searching for her inside and out. Then, at about midnight, I heard the front door open slowly and slam shut. My heart leaped. It must be her, I thought. I wheeled around and shouted, "Cassie, you're back. I was so worried." Yet there was no reply. All I could hear was the squeaking of writing. Then I realized she was writing a single character on every mirror. The number 1. That was last night. I don't know what to do now. My wife's flight was delayed. It's still just us. Cassie is asleep in her room. I took the mirror again, and it sits on the nightstand near my desk where I'm writing this. I have an inescapable feeling of dread for some reason. I keep telling myself this must just be a game, a cry for help. But I don't know what to do. My eyes feel heavy suddenly. I think I need to lie down. Somehow, I woke up holding the mirror. The numbers. They were all there. Cassie is asleep. Somehow she slept through it. But something happened. I was holding the mirror and the marker. I saw the numbers and brand new strange signs on the mirrors that hadn't been there before. Worst of all, it looked like my handwriting. As I struggled to make sense of it, I felt the pressure of some unseen force. I took another look at the mirror's oddly shifting reflection, and the surface gave way to something else. A face made of pure darkness with deep red eyes stared back at me. Suddenly, the mirror cracked under the strain of the force, then shattered completely. I jumped in surprise, and as I recovered, I heard a cacophony of breaking glass throughout the house. The pressure released in a violent rush, and a fetid, rotting smell filled the air. In the distance, I heard an unnatural voice echoing faintly. The Mirror Man is real. And whatever he is, I think I let him out. I need to get Cassie, and get out of here now before her friend finds us first. The circuit. The tribunal room smelled faintly of bleach and old circuitry. Its white walls hummed with invisible currents, as if the building itself were preparing to pass judgment. Eric Ostander sat in the center of it all, his wrists bound in smooth flex metal cuffs that tightened whenever he moved too abruptly. He had tried speaking once already, but the panel had ignored him, their attention locked onto the flickering wall of screens behind him. On those screens, a parade of faces scrolled past. Some wept, others contorted with pain, and still others glared at the unseen audience with an accusatory hatred that felt engineered. Each face was tagged with a name, a date, and a blinking red caption. Victim. Eric gritted his teeth. He knew every one of those faces, or he had at least in some distorted form of reality. The boy with the severed artery, the woman crushed beneath a commuter train, the elderly man whose heart had stopped before Eric could even reach him. Each of them had slipped through his hands despite everything he had done to save them. Now the system had transformed their deaths into a prosecutorial highlight reel. A mechanical voice crackled from the ceiling. Subject 24-8902. Eric Ostander. Convicted of negligent manslaughter under Section 13B of the Unified Civil Code. Recommended corrective action. Full-term emotional restitution via circuit immersion. Eric shifted in his seat. "You have it wrong," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "I did everything I could. I was cleared by my supervisors. Silence!" interrupted a human voice, sharper and colder than the machine. Warden Calder stepped into view from behind the tribunal's glass dais, his hands folded neatly behind his back. He wore the standard gray uniform of the Circuit Management Division, but there was a meticulousness to him that made the fabric look sharper, more authoritarian. His eyes were flat, almost bored, as they assessed Eric. "You misunderstand your position, Mr. Ostander," Calder said. "This is not a court of law. It is a closure assessment panel. Your guilt is not in question." Eric opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. Somewhere behind Calder, he caught a glimpse of another figure, Dr. Sorel Heim. She lingered near the edge of the room, half concealed by a bank of monitors. Her face was pale, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her coat. She would not meet. Eric's eyes. You are sentenced, Calder continued, to undergo full emotional restitution cycles for each of your proven victims. You will experience their pain, their confusion, and their fear until your empathic quotient reaches acceptable corrective thresholds. Eric clenched his fists, feeling the flex metal dig into his wrists. You want me to suffer for things I didn't cause. You will relive what they felt, Calder said, as if reading from a script. Your denial is irrelevant. The lights dimmed. Somewhere behind him, Eric heard the quiet hiss of hydraulics. 2 armored attendants entered, carrying a slender coffin-like pod between them. Its surface was black and polished, reflecting the tribunal's sterile glare. Eric fought the urge to pull away as the attendants unshackled him and guided him to the pod. It smelled faintly of anesthetics and burnt ozone. Above its open hatch, a phrase glowed in sterile blue text. The circuit empathy through experience. He twisted his head to look at Dr. Heim. You know this is wrong, he said. You know it. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Fear, regret, perhaps a mixture of both. Then she looked away. The attendants pushed him gently but firmly into the pod. Cold gel conformed to his back and arms, seeping through, his clothes in clammy waves. Metal arms descended from the ceiling, snaking electrodes along his temples, spine, and chest. A spike of panic shot through him as the hatch began to lower. Calder's voice spoke one last time, amplified through hidden speakers. Welcome to your correction, Mr. Ostander. May you find clarity within your suffering. The lid sealed shut with a heavy thump. Darkness swallowed him. Inside the pod, Eric's world reduced itself to sensations. The rhythmic thud of his heart, the chilling creep of the Jill against his skin, and the growing roar of something stirring deep within the machinery. He tried to breathe deeply and focus, but the air tasted strange, synthetic and overly sweet. A low vibration began beneath him, at first, almost imperceptible. It grew steadily, thrumming up his spine and setting his teeth on edge. Colors flared, behind his closed eyelids, reds and yellows, then blues that stretched and split into impossible geometric shapes. A probing, intrusive curiosity flickered, like static, along Eric's consciousness. He gritted his teeth harder, instinctively, trying to shield himself. It only seemed to encourage the presence. Words, phrases, and images flashed past him in a staccato burst of memory fragments. Gurney wheels rattling across cracked asphalt. Someone's sobbing breath against his shoulder. The acrid smell of engine fires, the sharp, metallic taste of fear. Faces emerged and vanished, too quickly to focus on. Patients, colleagues, strangers. Some were real, some were not. All of them judged him with blank, glassy eyes. A soft female voice, disembodied and almost tender, whispered in his ear. Please remember. Eric tried to speak, but the pod absorbed his voice. He raised his hand to pound on the hatch, but it was no longer there. His arm passed through empty space. The thrum intensified, resolving itself into a full-body vibration that blurred the boundaries of his body. A sensation like falling seized him, a nauseating drop that dragged him downward, even though he knew he was lying flat. Then, with a wrenching snap, reality reasserted itself. He opened his eyes. The world that greeted him was wrong in ways his mind could not immediately comprehend. The air shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. Medical monitors blinked and beeped in chaotic patterns, none of them matching any rhythm he could recognize. And standing before him, on a hospital gurney slick with blood, was a child. The boy could not have been older than 8. His shirt was soaked crimson, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it seemed to radiate from him. His mouth opened and closed without sound, a fish gasping on dry land. Eric staggered forward instinctively, reaching for the boy, but the floor beneath him shifted, throwing him off balance. He caught himself against a wall that felt soft and warm beneath his fingers. Somewhere overhead, a calm, mechanical voice spoke. Cycle 1 initialized. Subject, Marcus A. Lind. Trauma protocol, arterial laceration, exsanguination, death. Time, remaining 6 minutes. The boy looked up at him, trembling, pleading. Eric's mind reeled. This isn't right. This isn't how it happened. He remembered the real Marcus, the boy who had collapsed in his mother's arms at a school carnival, already beyond saving when Eric had arrived. But here, in this place, Marcus still lived. And it was up to Eric to relive his death. The lights overhead flickered. The room seemed to tilt. In the corner of the room, a mirror cracked slowly, a jagged fracture snaking across its surface. In the reflection, Eric saw himself, not as he was, but as something else. His hands dripped blood. His uniform was torn and stained. His eyes gleamed with a hard, cruel light. He jerked his head away, refusing to believe it. "I'm not," he whispered. The voice returned, almost chiding. "Relive, repent, restore." The boy reached out a small, shaking hand. The pod's gel had long since soaked into Eric's skin, but he felt another coldness spreading now, this one from within. Somewhere deep down, a tiny voice whispered back against the circuit's programming, a last flicker of resistance. "This is not who I am." He reached for the boy, and the world came apart. The walls flexed and shuddered as if the building itself were convulsing. Eric fell to his knees, clutching the boy's cold hand, feeling the sticky warmth of blood seeping between his fingers. Above them, alarms screamed in broken intervals, too warped to be mistaken for real sirens. He pressed his palm against the boy's wound, desperate to stem the bleeding, but the skin beneath his touch split further, blooming fresh rivers of crimson. Marcus whimpered, his mouth shaping silent pleas. No, this isn't how it happened," Eric muttered. He pressed harder, ignoring the way the gurney sagged beneath them, threatening to pull both of them into some unseen depth. From the far end of the room, translucent figures began to materialize. Nurses, doctors, bystanders, all watching with blank, dispassionate eyes. None of them moved to help. They stood still like mannequins awaiting instruction, their faces blurry and indistinct. Eric looked around frantically. The medical kit he had carried on that night should have been within arm's reach, but here there was nothing but a pile of crumpled paper and a shattered IV stand. Every step he took to reach for equipment resulted in it melting into useless debris the moment his fingers brushed it. The disembodied voice returned, colder than before. "Cycle instability detected. Correction protocol initializing." The floor lurched violently, pitching Eric sideways. He shielded Marcus with his body as the room folded inward, walls bending toward them like the closing jaws of a trap. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing the nightmare to stop. When he opened them again, he found himself standing alone. Marcus was gone. The room had rearranged itself into a sterile hallway, stretching endlessly in both directions. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering spasmodically. Eric staggered forward, drawn by a barely perceptible tug somewhere deep in his chest. His hands trembled, stained with blood that would not wash away, no matter how hard he wiped them against his uniform. As he moved, the hallway walls began to change. Pictures appeared, photographs nailed to the walls with crude iron spikes. Each photo captured a moment of failure. Marcus's face twisted in agony, the woman from the car crash lying broken across the asphalt, an old man gasping for breath, as blue-lit paramedics looked on helplessly. Each photo bore a word beneath it in burning red letters: murderer. Eric tried to turn away, but the hallway closed in, forcing him onward. The farther he walked, the louder the whispers grew. Voices that sounded suspiciously like his own thoughts turned hostile. You could have saved them. You wanted to be the hero, but you were never enough. You let them die. No, he said aloud, his voice cracking. I tried to save them. The hallway split ahead, forming two paths. On one side, a door marked Confession shone with a dim orange glow. On the other, a door marked Denial flickered erratically, as if struggling to remain intact. Eric hesitated only a moment before charging toward the second door. He slammed his shoulder into it, feeling it shatter. He stumbled through into a scene that at first seemed familiar. A hospital waiting room with sunlight slanting through its dusty windows. plastic chairs bolted to the floor. An outdated vending machine hummed in the corner. His mother sat in one of the chairs, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked just as he remembered her. Gray-streaked hair pulled back tightly, glasses perched low on her nose, a worn paperback clutched in her fingers. "Mom?" he croaked. She looked up, her face softening into a sad smile. "You know the truth, Eric," she said, using the childhood version of his name, the one no one else had ever called him. Tears burned in his eyes. He stepped forward, but when he reached out, his hand passed through her like mist. She wavered and flickered, her form distorting. The vending machine behind her split open, disgorging a stream of crimson that pooled at her feet. Her face twisted, not in anger but in disappointment. "You know," she repeated, her voice echoing as if from the bottom of a well. "You know." The waiting room collapsed inward. Eric screamed, reaching for her again, but the world dissolved. Around him into a howling void. He landed hard on a cracked asphalt road, the impact jarring his bones. Around him, a storm raged. Lightning clawed at the sky, illuminating a barren wasteland of twisted metal and smoking wreckage. He recognized the scene immediately, the aftermath of the freeway accident. He had been first on the scene that night, scrambling over broken guardrails and crushed vehicles, pulling survivors from burning wreckage. In the real world, he had done everything possible. He had saved lives. But here, in the circuits warped. Recreation? The victims lay scattered across the asphalt like discarded dolls, their bodies broken and bleeding. And they were all staring at him. "You left us," one woman rasped, struggling to lift her shattered arm. "You promised you'd help," a boy whimpered, his legs twisted at unnatural angles. Eric backed away. "This isn't real," he said, his voice shaking. "This isn't how it happened." The storm intensified, driving sheets of rain sideways across the scene. The asphalt writhed beneath him, buckling and cracking. From the fissures, more faces emerged, faces he recognized and faces he did not, all accusing, all pleading. The disembodied voice returned, booming louder this time. Cycle deviation at 47%. Subject displays persistent cognitive dissonance, initiating corrective distortion. The world around him rippled like water disturbed by a thrown stone. The wreckage twisted itself into new, grotesque shapes. Cars became cages. Bodies became mannequins with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. He stumbled forward, trying to find some point of orientation, some foothold in the madness. In the distance, he spotted another figure, a paramedic standing with their back to him, their uniforms soaked by the rain. Relief surged through him. He ran toward the figure, slipping and sliding on the wet asphalt. "Hey, over here," he shouted. Tiu. Figure turned slowly. It was him. Or rather, it was a warped, corrupted version of him. His own face twisted into a grotesque grin, his eyes hollow and shining with an unnatural light. The doppelganger raised a blood-stained hand and pointed directly at him. The accusing whispers rose into a deafening roar. "You knew. You let them die. You made them suffer." Eric fell to his knees, clutching his head. "No," he gasped. "I tried. I swear I tried." The double began to laugh, a dry, rattling sound that scraped against the inside of Eric's skull. It advanced toward him, each step leaving burning footprints on the ground. From somewhere unseen, a new voice whispered, softer, almost sorrowful. "You can end this. Just admit it." He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting back the urge to give in. He knew the moment he accepted the simulation's version of reality, he would lose whatever anchor to the truth he still possessed. The false Eric knelt beside him, whispering in a voice that was almost his own. "It would be easier if you stopped fighting." Eric forced himself to his feet. He took one staggering step backward, then another. The storm lashed at him, but he pressed on. He turned and fled into the swirling chaos, each step harder than the last, the ground itself seeming to resist his escape. Behind him, the circuit howled in frustration. The corrupted world cracked and splintered, unable to contain him. At the far end of the wreckage, a doorway flickered into existence, simple, unmarked, pulsing with a dim golden light. Eric lunged for it, hurling himself through just as the world behind him collapsed into darkness. The moment Eric crossed the threshold, the golden light vanished, the air dense with the scent of burned plastic and rusted iron. He stumbled forward, blind, until the ground solidified beneath his feet with a wet, sucking sound. Gradually, the darkness receded, peeling away like old paint. He found himself standing at the edge of a vast highway intersection, the scene illuminated by the angry red glow of shattered street lamps. The skeletal remains of cars were strewn across the asphalt, their twisted frames jutting upward like broken bones. Ahead of him, a single vehicle stood out among the wreckage. A crushed sedan, its roof caved in, smoke curling from the engine block. The windshield had been punched out and a woman's arm hung limply from the driver's side window, her fingers brushing the pavement. Without hesitation, Eric ran toward the wreck, his boots slapping the slick asphalt. As he drew closer, he recognized the woman slumped inside, Carla Mendez. He remembered her from the real world, a single mother pinned beneath the steering wheel after a collision with a drunk driver. She had still been alive when he reached her, breathing shallowly, clutching a locket pressed to her chest. In reality, she had died en route to the hospital, despite everything Eric had done to stabilize her. But here, in the twisted echo the circuit had conjured, Carla's chest rose and fell in short, panicked gasps. Blood pooled beneath the car door, spreading across the street in unnatural patterns, shapes that seemed to twitch when Eric was not looking directly at them. He dropped to his knees beside the wreck. "Carla," he said urgently, "hold on. I'm going to get you out." She turned her head toward him with great effort. Her eyes were clouded, unfocused. She opened her mouth to speak, but the only sound that emerged was a wet gurgle. Frantic, Eric searched for something to use as a lever, something to pry the door open. His hands found only splintered metal and scraps of fabric. Every tool he grasped disintegrated into ash the moment he touched it. He pounded his fists against the door, frustration boiling over. The rain began to fall, thick and oily, slicking the ground and stinging his skin. The drops left trails of smoke where they landed, eating tiny holes into the asphalt. From the shadows along the perimeter of the scene, figures began to emerge. Dozens of them, dressed in dark uniforms, their faces hidden behind mirrored masks. They formed a circle around the wreck, watching silently. Eric rose to his feet, fists clenched. "Help me!" he shouted at them. "She's dying! We have to move her!" None of the figures moved. Their mirrored faces reflected his desperation back at him, amplifying it. He turned back to Carla. Her breathing had grown more ragged, her hands twitching feebly against the steering wheel. A new voice echoed across the ruined highway, amplified as if through a distant loudspeaker. Subject failed intervention protocol, initiating escalation. The world around him buckled. The wrecked cars twisted inward, stacking atop one another to form towering barricades. The asphalt cracked and split, vomiting up vines of rebar and jagged concrete. The masked figures closed, ranks, their numbers multiplying until they formed an impenetrable wall. A hot, bitter rage surged through Eric, burning away the last traces of fear. He had played by the rules, he had tried to help, and the circuit had punished him for it. "You think this is justice?" he roared at the faceless crowd. "You think this makes me guilty?" The ground quivered beneath him. Carla's body jerked violently as if yanked by unseen strings. Her mouth stretched into a rictus grin, blood pouring from her teeth. "You let me die," she said, her voice impossibly loud, echoing from all directions. "You chose to fail." The rage inside Eric snapped its leash. He rushed the nearest masked figure, slamming into it with the full weight of his body. The figure crumpled instantly, breaking apart into shards of black glass that evaporated before they hit the ground. The others surged forward in response. Eric fought them blindly, swinging his fists, grabbing anything he could use as a weapon. His blows landed with sickening force, and each shattered figure released a burst of shrill mechanical wailing before dissolving into the air. The highway, Scene degraded around him, the borders between reality and simulation peeling away like rotted wallpaper. Structures collapsed, the sky fissured, and the ground beneath his feet became an unstable patchwork of flickering images. The carnival where Marcus had collapsed, the freeway pileup, the sterile waiting room where his mother had smiled her sad, knowing smile. He stumbled through the ruins, his fury carrying him forward even as exhaustion clawed at his limbs. He heard a new sound then, faint but unmistakable, the soft sobbing of a child. Eric turned. Standing alone amidst the chaos was a young girl, no more than 6 years old. She wore a tattered hospital gown stained with blood. Her eyes were enormous, glistening pools of terror. "Help me," she whispered. Eric hesitated. Every instinct in him screamed to run to her, to gather her up and shield her from the nightmare. But something about her, the way her shadow stretched in the wrong direction, the way her voice resonated deeper than her frame should allow, stopped him cold. He took a cautious step forward. The girl's expression twisted, the fear draining, from her face replaced by something cold and ancient. "You belong here," she said, her voice layered with a dozen other tones. "You were always meant to stay." The ground at his feet cracked open, revealing a yawning chasm filled with writhing shapes, hands reaching upward to drag him down. Eric staggered back, panic slicing through the fog of rage. He spun around searching for an escape route, but the ruins closed in from all sides. The sky split open, a massive burning eye glaring down at him from the swirling clouds. Its gaze pinned him in place, stripping away every illusion, every defense. He saw himself reflected in that gaze, not as a healer or a savior, but as a destroyer. Blood caked his hands, soaked into his uniform. His eyes gleamed with a cruel light. A voice, ancient and inevitable, boomed from the heavens. "You are what they made you." The masked figures reappeared, advancing on him in perfect synchrony. Their mirrored faces no longer reflected his desperation. Instead, they reflected his rage, his violence, his willingness to hurt. Eric backed away and tripped over Carla's, body now bloated and grotesque, her mouth still frozen in that terrible smile. The figures closed in. "No," Eric screamed. "This isn't me. I'm not like this." The sky shuddered, the ground lurched, and a new portal opened in the wreckage. A shimmering doorway framed in blinding white light. Without hesitation, Eric hurled himself toward it, diving through just as the figures reached for him. The light swallowed him whole. He fell through it for what felt like forever, the burning eye fading into darkness behind him. When he landed, it was on solid ground, cool and real beneath his palms. He lay there for a long moment, gasping, his mind struggling to piece together what remained of his sanity. Somewhere nearby, a soft voice whispered, "The circuit only mirrors what you make it." Eric pushed himself to his knees, blinking against the dim light. Standing a few feet away was Dr. Sorella Heim, or at least a distorted, flickering version of her. She looked thinner, almost translucent, as if she were barely holding herself. "Together. You," he rasped. "What is this?" She met his gaze with infinite sadness. "You are changing it," she said. "And it is changing you." Before he could reply, her image shattered like glass, vanishing into the gloom. He staggered to his feet, swaying unsteadily. The new environment was different, quieter, colder. He stood at the threshold of a cityscape carved from shadow and bone. Buildings twisted at impossible angles, their windows like black staring eyes. A road stretched before him, narrow and winding, lined with broken statues of faceless figures reaching upward in silent supplication. There was no way back. There was only forward. Eric clenched his fists, feeling the dried blood crack across his knuckles. Somewhere deep inside him, a voice whispered. Not the voice of the circuit, but his own. "If they want a monster, I'll give them one." And he walked on. The road narrowed as Eric advanced, the statues pressing in closer with every step. Their stone arms strained toward the sky, but none seemed able to reach it. The city beyond loomed, its towers bent and broken, scraping at a bruised sky. The silence weighed heavily on him. Every footfall echoed like a gunshot in the abandoned streets. Windows stared blankly down, reflecting distorted versions of his figure. Some wounded, some smiling coldly, some covered in blood. He kept moving. As he reached the edge of the city proper, he fought an overwhelming urge to stop and turn back, pushing through it, his jaw clenched. Ahead, a small crowd gathered in the center of a roundabout. They stood motionless, heads bowed, hands clasped before them like mourners at a funeral. As Eric approached, they turned in unison, faces lifting. Every face in the crowd was his own. Their expressions varied, some pleading, some mocking, some filled with abject terror, but all unmistakably bore his features. A low murmur rose among them, carrying words that twisted his stomach into knots. You let us become this. You are the architect of your own damnation. You are what you feared. He tried to deny it, tried to remind himself of who he was, but the words felt hollow. Memories flickered at the edges of his mind, real ones or what he had once believed to be real, tainted now by the circuit's endless distortions. The crowd of Erics parted slowly, revealing a figure seated on a crude throne of rusted metal and bone. The figure rose and stepped forward. It was another version of himself, but larger, more imposing, clad in a paramedic's uniform soaked through with dark stains. His face was twisted into a permanent sneer, his eyes glowing with a predatory light. This version of Eric spoke with a voice like cracking stone. You fought so hard to be better, it said, circling him slowly. But you were always meant for this. You feel it now, don't you? Eric stood his ground. I'm not you, he said, the words scraping painfully from his throat. The doppelganger smiled, revealing teeth sharpened into points. You will be. The crowd surged forward, surrounding him, hands grabbing at his arms, his shoulders, his throat. Their touch burned, leaving trails of searing pain across his skin. He struggled, lashing out blindly, breaking their grip. But for every figure he tore away, two more took their place. The doppelganger reached out, placing a hand on Eric's forehead. The touch sent a jolt of freezing cold down his spine. In that moment, visions flooded him. Images of himself, not as savior, but as executioner. In the visions, he stood over the bodies of victims he had failed to save, laughing. He saw himself shoving colleagues aside, ignoring cries for help, leaving survivors to bleed out while he walked away. Each vision chipped away at him, corroding the bedrock of who he thought he was. He stumbled backward, gasping. You see it, now, the doppelganger said, its voice low and triumphant. You are not the victim here. You are the infection. The crowd pressed in tighter. Their bodies merged, becoming a massive, shifting mass of limbs and faces, all bearing his own likeness. In desperation, Eric clenched his fists and screamed, a raw sound torn from deep within him. The force of it blasted the mass away, sending figures tumbling through the air like ragdolls. The doppelganger stumbled but did not fall. It straightened, grinning wider than before. You're learning, it said approvingly. You're becoming. The city itself began to change in response. Buildings twisted into grotesque mockeries of human anatomy. Flesh-like walls heaved. Window eyes blinked and wept tar. The sky above ruptured, black tendrils slithering through the cracks. Eric stood at the epicenter of it all, his body trembling. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him recoiled, horrified at the transformation. Another part, the part the circuit had been nurturing all along, rejoiced. He turned his gaze on the doppelganger. I won't become what you are, he said, though the conviction in his voice wavered. You already have, the other Eric said. You just don't have the courage to admit it yet. Before he could respond, the ground beneath him split open with a thunderous crack. He fell through darkness, tumbling end over end until he crashed onto a cold metallic surface. The air here was colder, filled with the sterile tang of antiseptic and ozone. He pushed himself up and found himself standing in a place he recognized. Instantly, the hospital where he had completed his internship, or rather, a nightmarish reflection of it. The corridors stretched on forever, the overhead lights flickering. At the far end of the hall, a single figure waited. His mother. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, her face drawn tight with sorrow. Her glasses glinted in the unsteady light, obscuring her eyes. "Mom," Eric said, his voice cracking. She said nothing. Instead, she turned and began to walk away, her steps slow and measured. Eric followed, pursuing her through the endless halls, calling her name. But she never looked back. The walls around them twisted and warped, reshaping into a grotesque mockery of the places he had once called safe. His childhood home, his elementary school, the park where he had learned to ride a bike. In each new setting, he caught glimpses of distorted memories, scenes replayed with subtle, horrifying differences. His father raising a hand to strike him, though he had never done so. His mother turning away as he cried out for help. The circuit was rewriting his past brick by brick. He found himself back in the hospital at last, standing before a room marked with a glowing plaque. Self. He reached for the door handle, hesitating, only briefly before pushing it open. Inside, he found a surgical theater bathed in harsh white light. On the table at the center of the room lay another version of himself, strapped down with thick leather restraints. This Eric was badly broken, bruised, bloodied, and barely breathing. Standing beside the table was the monstrous doppelganger, now clad in a surgeon's gown, holding a scalpel that dripped black ichor. "Time to finish the procedure, the Yao," Surgeon Eric said. The broken Eric on the table turned his head weakly, locking eyes with him. There was no accusation there, only pleading. "Please," the broken Eric rasped. "Don't let them make you forget." Eric stood frozen, torn between the raging fury the circuit had stoked and the fading embers of who he had once been. The surgeon Eric extended the scalpel toward him, offering it handle first. "Your choice," he said. Eric stared at the instrument, at the broken version of himself lying helpless on the table. For a long, agonizing moment, he wavered. Finally, he reached out, but instead of taking the scalpel, he knocked it aside. It clattered to the floor, the black ichor hissing where it splattered. The surgeon Eric's face twisted in fury, but before he could react, the room began to collapse. Walls crumbled, the floor buckled, and the world tore itself apart. The last thing Eric saw before the void claimed him was his mother's face, watching from the observation window above. She smiled, not with sorrow, but with pride. And then, everything shattered. The void swallowed him whole, an endless ocean of black that stretched beyond thought or memory. Eric floated weightlessly, untethered from any sense of direction. There was no ground beneath him, no sky above, only a vast, featureless expanse humming with low, malevolent energy. For a long time, minutes, hours, or perhaps days, he remained suspended there, neither falling nor rising. He might have stayed forever had a voice not pierced the darkness. Subject 248902. Emotional reconstitution incomplete. Initiating eternal circuit protocol. The voice was neither triumphant nor regretful. It simply existed, clinical and absolute. The darkness thinned. Shapes formed around him, coalescing into a landscape both familiar and grotesquely new. He found himself standing in the center of a city, a distorted version of the one he had glimpsed earlier. The buildings here were taller, their jagged spires thrusting skyward. The streets stretched endlessly in all directions, looping back on themselves in impossible configurations. At first, the streets were empty. Then, slowly, figures began to emerge from the shadows. They were not the masked watchers from before, nor were they the mirror-faced doppelgangers. These figures were worse. They were victims. Everyone Eric had ever failed, twisted by grief and rage into monstrous parodies of themselves. Their mouths gaped in silent screams, their eyes hollow and black. Some dragged broken limbs behind them. Others bore the marks of wounds Eric remembered trying and failing to treat. He took a step backward, but the ground rippled beneath him. There would be no escape this time. The circuit had built this world from the ruins of his mind, and it had no intention of letting him go. A realization settled over him with cold certainty. This was his world now. The first of the creatures lunged at him. A young man, his face half torn away, wearing a bloodied varsity jacket. Eric recognized him instantly. Tommy Rayner, a teenager who had bled out in the back of an ambulance 3 years ago. Tommy's mouth stretched open, and a soundless howl tore from his throat. Eric braced himself. When the creature reached him, he moved without thinking. His hands found the thing's throat, and he squeezed. There was no struggle. The creature disintegrated into a cloud of ash beneath his fingers. Another figure attacked, a woman crawling on shattered legs, her face contorted in endless accusation. Eric stepped aside, letting her collapse onto the ground where she dissolved into dust. The others hesitated. A twisted sort of understanding flickered in Eric's mind. These things, the reflections of his failures, had no real power over him. They existed only as long as he accepted their guilt. He could destroy them simply by refusing to be broken by them. But there was a cost. Every act of violence, every rejection of regret, chipped away at something inside him. He could feel it happening even now, as the embers of who he had once been dimmed further with each passing second. A figure appeared ahead of him, different from the others. It was himself. Again, another distorted version, but now clad in a tattered paramedic uniform, a hollow crown of iron welded to his scalp. This version carried no weapons, only an expression of weary, inevitable cruelty. It gestured to the city around them. "Rule it," the crowned Eric said. "Make them suffer as you have suffered." Eric said nothing. He stepped forward, his footsteps leaving scorched prints on the cracked pavement. The crowned version of himself smiled approvingly and vanished. The city reshaped itself in response to Eric's movement. Buildings toppled and new structures rose. Roads twisted into labyrinthine patterns that funneled the monstrous figures toward him. He stood at the center, watching as the victims approached, stumbling and crawling over one another in their desperation. He waited until they were close enough to see the fear in their hollow eyes. Then he unleashed himself. He tore through them without hesitation, reducing the creatures to clouds of dust with every blow. They offered no real resistance. Their existence depended on his belief in their power, and he no longer granted them that mercy. The more he destroyed, the more distorted the city became. Towers bent backward into impossible angles. Windows melted into weeping mouths. The sky itself cracked open, revealing glimpses of infinite void beyond. He lost track of time. Whether minutes or days passed, he could not say. Only the endless cycle remained. Hunt, destroy, rebuild, repeat. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of his mother's face in shattered windows or pools of black water, but those images flickered and faded quickly, like dying memories. Somewhere deep within him, a faint voice, his true voice, pleaded for him to stop, to remember who he had once been. He silenced it without effort. At the edge of the broken skyline, a new presence stirred. Dr. Sorelheim appeared, her projection flickering and unstable. She looked gaunt, her features strained as though stretched too thin across her skull. She stepped toward him cautiously, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Eric," she said, her voice raw with sorrow. "This wasn't supposed to happen." He regarded her without emotion. "You were supposed to heal," she continued. "You were supposed to find redemption, not this." He tilted his head slightly, considering her words. "You built this," he said at last, his voice low and even. "You put me here." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her already flickering form. "I know," she whispered. "I tried to warn you. I tried to fix it." Behind her, the monstrous victims gathered again, but they remained at a distance. Wary now, Eric took a step toward Dr. Heim. She flinched but held her ground. "You still have a choice," she said desperately. "You can still remember who you are. You can stop this." He looked past her at the broken city he had forged, the ash and ruin that had become his kingdom. A part of him, a small, flickering ember buried deep beneath the layers of rage and grief, wanted to believe her, but the ember was too faint. He reached out, not to hurt her, but to dismiss her. His hand passed through her projection, scattering it like smoke. Dr. Himes' form dissolved, leaving only the echo of her voice. We made you what we feared. Alone once more, Eric turned back toward the endless city. The circuit responded eagerly to his presence, offering new horrors to create, new victims to punish. He walked forward, the road unfolding at his feet. In time, the monstrous figures resumed their approach, drawn to him like moths to a flame. He welcomed them, shaping their fates with a thought, twisting the simulation to suit his will. The circuit no longer needed to manipulate him. It had succeeded. He was the monster it had falsely accused him of being. As he walked through the ruins, his voice, once so full of compassion and hope, rose in a soft, broken murmur. I'll make you hurt, just like you made me. Above him, the sky fractured and wept. Beneath his feet, the world crumbled and rebuilt itself endlessly. And Eric, Ostander, the last remnant of a man who had once tried to save lives, disappeared into the endless nightmare he had helped to create.